Governor California holds the distinct title of having the nation's most severe poverty levels when adjusted for the cost of living, sitting at the 23.5%. This alarming figure signifies that practically 1 out of every 4 Californians is currently existing in a state of destitution, despite your administration presiding over the 5th largest economic engine on the planet. How can you possibly characterize this situation as a triumphant narrative of success? Ben Shapiro's sharp voice sliced through Gavin Newsom's rehearsed introductory remarks, like a precision surgical instrument cutting through delicate fabric. The 200 spectators packed into the Fox News studio, a specially built debate arena, fell into a stunned silence. This was not the standard operating procedure for how these political exchanges typically commenced. Moderators were supposed to pose inquiries, while opponents patiently awaited their designated turn to speak. However, Shapiro had abruptly interjected during Newsom's carefully polished opening monologue regarding California's supposed unmatched prosperity, hitting him with a statistic that transformed that success into an audible failure. Newsom hesitated in the middle of a sentence, his practiced and telegenic smile wavering for just a fleeting second. He had barely been 30 seconds into his opening pitch, the one about California leading the country in innovation, diversity, and climate solutions, when Shapiro derailed the entire train of thought with a single and hard number. "Well, Ben, I am aware that you chose to abandon California." Newsom attempted to pivot the conversation toward the personal realm to make Shapiro the villain who fled the state. "I departed because I simply could not afford to purchase a residence on a 6-figure salary, whereas you reside in a $3.7 million mansion that is funded by the taxpayers." Let us discuss why a financially successful podcast host was unable to afford California, yet a public servant governor can live in absolute luxury. The audience began to murmur, realizing that this encounter was going to be fundamentally different from standard political theater. Brett Baer, the Fox News moderator, seated between the two combatants, attempted to regain control of the room. "Gentlemen, we have 90 minutes allocated for this debate. Perhaps the governor should be allowed to answer the specific question?" Shapiro replied without breaking eye contact with Newsom, reiterating that 23.5% is the poverty rate, which is the highest in the entire nation. "You have served as governor for 6 years, and before that, you were lieutenant governor and the mayor of San Francisco. You have held significant power in California for nearly 20 years, yet the poverty rate has progressively worsened under your watch. Why is that the case?" Newsom looked toward Baer for assistance, but the moderator simply looked back, signaling that this was a debate, and questions were a fair game. Shapiro's inquiry was bolstered by verifiable statistics derived directly from the U.S. Census Bureau's supplemental poverty measure. "California possesses the highest cost of living in the nation," Newsom stated, attempting to sound reasonable and measured. "That is a direct result of our immense success, as people desire to live here, and that demand drives up costs." "You are working on it by actively making the situation worse," Shapiro interrupted again. "The median home price in California is $800,000, while the national average sits at merely $417,000. Your regulations, your zoning laws, and your environmental restrictions make it nearly impossible to construct housing, so prices inevitably skyrocket, and the middle class is forced to leave. You lost over 500,000 net residents between the years 2020 and 2023. They are not departing because California is too successful. They are leaving because they physically cannot afford to exist there." Newsom's smile had completely vanished now, merely 45 seconds into the debate, and he was already forced onto the defensive. This scenario was not supposed to unfold in this manner. He was the smooth-talking governor with high presidential ambitions, while Shapiro was supposed to be just a fast-talking podcast host. Newsom was intended to project superior leadership, while Shapiro came across as an aggressive commentator. However, Shapiro possessed numbers, specific hard data, and numbers did not care about charisma. "We are currently building more housing than ever before," Newsom tried to assert. "You are constructing luxury condominiums that cost $1 million. You are not building homes that teachers, nurses, and firefighters can actually afford. That is the reason why they are leaving. That is why I left. And that is why we are going to spend the next 90 minutes discussing why California has become unaffordable. Despite having every natural advantage, including weather, ports, agriculture, and technology, the state has become unlivable for the middle class under your specific leadership. The audience applauded, not everyone, as it was a mixed crowd required by the agreement, but enough that Newsom felt the sting. He had walked onto this stage thinking he could charm his way through the night. He planned to pivot to attacking Trump and Republicans, making the evening about values and broad vision. Shapiro was clearly not going to allow him that luxury. This was going to be about facts, numbers, outcomes, and results. Gavin Newsom was about to discover that his political record could not survive that level of scrutiny. 6 hours earlier, Gavin Newsom sat in his green room at Fox News headquarters in New York, reviewing his notes one final time with his senior staff. He felt good, confident, as this debate had been in the works for 3 months. Ever since Shapiro, a former Californian who had relocated to Florida, had publicly challenged Newsom to defend California's policies on national television. Newsom's team had initially dismissed the idea, telling him you don't debate podcasters because you are a governor with presidential ambitions. It is beneath you, they had said, but the challenge had gained significant traction. Other commentators picked it up, and conservative media ran with the narrative asking if Newsom was afraid to defend his record. Even some liberal outlets started asking why he would not debate California's policies. Finally, Newsom's political advisers made the calculation. Refusing looked weak, but accepting and winning would establish him as the reasonable progressive who could handle tough questions. It could prove he was ready for the national stage in 2028, so they accepted the challenge. Fox News as the venue was the compromise, entering Shapiro's territory, but with a professional moderator and debate rules. There would be 90 minutes, opening statements, structured topics, and a live audience of 200 carefully selected to be balanced. Remember the strategy? His chief of staff said, reviewing the game plan one more time. Stay calm, don't let him rattle you with rapid-fire delivery. Pivot to values when he gets into the weeds, make it about vision versus negativity, and bring it back to Trump whenever possible. Remind people that Shapiro supported Trump and that this is really about the future of the country. Newsom nodded, as he had done hundreds of debates, and this was just another one. Shapiro could talk fast and throw out statistics, but Newsom had spent 6 years as governor. He knew California's policies inside and out, and he could defend them. If he brings up the French Laundry, his communications director asked. I apologized at the time. It was a lapse in judgment during a difficult period. I took responsibility, so move on to how we handled the pandemic better than Republican states. If he brings up your kid's private school, that is a personal family decision that I don't discuss publicly. But I am proud of California's investment in public education, which has the highest per-pupil spending in the nation. They had rehearsed all of this, ensuring every potential attack had a prepared response. Every criticism had a pivot to Republican failures. And Newsom had been media-trained by the best. What he didn't know was that 3 floors down in a conference room converted into a war room, Ben Shapiro sat surrounded by a different kind of preparation. Shapiro had spent 3 months on this, not just reviewing talking points. He had hired researchers to compile everything about California under Newsom's leadership. Every policy, every outcome, every failure, and every piece of hypocrisy was cataloged. The war room looked like something from a prosecutor's office. Whiteboards were covered with statistics, binders were organized by topic, and there were printed charts and graphs. There were photos and actual receipts, including the itemized bill from Newsom's French Laundry dinner that someone had leaked months ago. Let's review the structure one more time, Shapiro said to his team. He spoke quickly, as he always did, but with absolute precision. We have 90 minutes divided into 6 15-minute segments. I need to destroy him systematically. His lead researcher pulled up the outline on a screen. Segment 1 is opening statements and homelessness, so hit him with the $24 billion spent and the 42% increase. Make him defend the indefensible. Segment 2 is the middle-class exodus, focusing on the 500,000 net loss and the U-Haul rates. Make him explain why people are fleeing. Segment 3 covers business flight, citing Tesla, Oracle, and HP. Make him explain why his tax base is leaving. Segment 4 is crime, specifically Proposition 47 and the retail theft epidemic. Show the videos of people looting stores. Segment 5 is personal hypocrisy, covering the French Laundry, private schools, and plumpjack wineries getting state benefits. Make him defend living differently than he governs. Segment 6 is the failures, including high-speed rail, energy costs, and water management. Every big project that is over budget and under-delivered must be highlighted. Shapiro reviewed each section, ensuring he had specific numbers and examples for every topic. He noted specific contradictions between what Newsom said and what Newsom did. The key is not letting him deflect, Shapiro said. You are going to try to pivot to Trump, to Republican states, or to values. Every time he does, bring it back to California, to his record, and to results. Don't let him make this theoretical. Make it concrete. His producer asked the obvious question, asking, what if he has good answers or if the numbers are wrong? The numbers aren't wrong. They are from the Census Bureau and from California's own budget documents. He doesn't have good answers, which is why his team tried to avoid this debate for months. His record is indefensible. I just have to make sure he can't hide it with charm. At 8 p.m. Eastern, the lights came up on the Fox News debate stage. Bret Baier sat in the center. Gavin Newsom was to his right, wearing a perfectly tailored Navy suit, looking every inch the future president he imagined himself to be. Ben Shapiro was to his left, more casual in slacks and a button-down with no tie. A stack of folders in front of him looked ominous. "Good evening," Baier began, welcoming everyone to this special Fox News debate called The California Clash. We are here to discuss California's policies, challenges, and future. Governor Newsom, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Newsom smiled into the camera. Warm, confident, and presidential. Thank you, Bret, and thank you to Fox News for hosting this important conversation. I'm proud to be here to discuss California's record of success. Under my leadership, California has led the nation in economic growth. We are the 5th largest economy in the world, and we have created more jobs than any other state. We have led on climate action, taking on the fossil fuel industry, and investing in clean energy. We have protected reproductive rights and stood up for immigrant families. We have shown that progressive values and economic success go hand in hand. He was hitting his rhythm now, delivering the speech he had practiced. Now I know my opponent tonight left California. He decided our state wasn't for him, and that is his right. But millions of people choose California every day. They choose our innovation, our diversity, our values, and our future. While Ben criticizes from the sidelines, I am doing the hard work of governing the largest state in America. I am creating opportunity, protecting rights, and building a future where everyone thrives. Governor, California has the highest poverty rate in America when adjusted for cost of living. Shapiro's interruption hung in the air, and Baier looked startled. Mr. Shapiro, the governor has 2 minutes, and he is using it to recite talking points instead of addressing reality. 23.5% is the poverty rate, the highest in the nation. Nearly 1 in 4 Californians is living in poverty despite having the 5th largest economy. How is that success? Baier tried to maintain order, saying we will have time for rebuttals. I will yield my opening statement time, Shapiro said. I just want the governor to answer one question. If California is so successful, why do you have the highest poverty rate in America? The audience was riveted, as this was not how debates usually went. Shapiro had calculated that interrupting Newsom's polished opening would throw him off balance and make him defensive from the start. Newsom tried to recover his smile, saying, "Well, Ben, as I said, you left California, so perhaps you are not the best judge. I left because I couldn't afford to buy a house on a six-figure income. I was making over $200,000 a year from my podcast and media work. I couldn't afford a decent house in Los Angeles, so I moved to Florida, where I bought a beautiful home for half the price. I pay no state income tax and have better schools for my kids. So yes, I'm very qualified to judge why the middle class is fleeing California. Answer the question about the 23.5% poverty rate being the highest in the nation." Newsom looked at Bayer again, but got no help. California has a high cost of living because we are desirable and people want to live here. If people want to live there, why did you lose over 500,000 net residents in 3 years? That is 500,000 more people leaving than arriving, which is a net loss. Those aren't people who want to live in California. Those are people fleeing California. Some people left during COVID, and they are not coming back. The exodus started before COVID and accelerated after your state lost population for the first time in history. This was not because of a pandemic, but because of your policies. Newsom tried to pivot, saying if you look at Republican states like Texas and Florida, they have their own problems. We're not debating Texas, we're debating California. Your state, your policies, your outcomes. So defend them. Bayer jumped in, sensing this could spiral. Let's move to our first structured segment, homelessness. Governor Newsom, California, has spent approximately $24 billion on homelessness since you took office. The homeless population has increased by 42% in that time. What is your response? Newsom took a breath, back to prepared territory. Homelessness is a national crisis driven by housing costs, mental illness, and substance abuse. It is a California crisis. Shapiro interrupted again. You have 30% of America's homeless population with only 12% of the general population. This is not a national problem, this is your problem, and you have spent $24 billion making it worse. Shapiro pulled out a chart and showed it to the camera. This is California's homeless population from 2019 to 2024. It started at 151,000 and now it is 181,000. That is a 42% increase while you spent $24 billion. That is about $133,000 per homeless person. You could have bought each of them a house in most of America for that money. Newsom tried to interject, claiming that is a mischaracterization of how the funding works. Where did the money go? I will tell you where it went. Consultants. The city of Los Angeles paid a consultant $800,000 to study homelessness. Do you know what they produced? A 200-page report recommending more study. San Francisco spent $60,000 per tent for safe sleeping sites. You can buy a small house in many states for $60,000, but your state spent it on a tent. Shapiro was rapid-firing now, not giving Newsom space to respond. You built supportive housing units at an average cost of $750,000 per unit. The national average is $150,000. You spent 5 times the national average. That is not a housing crisis, that is a corruption crisis. That is consultants and contractors ripping off taxpayers while homeless people die on the streets. The audience was completely silent. Some were nodding while others looked shocked at the numbers. Newsom tried to regain control, saying, building in California is expensive because of land costs. Then change your zoning laws. Change your environmental review process that takes 7 years to approve a project. Change your regulations that make it impossible to build. You control all of this because you have supermajorities in the legislature. You could fix it tomorrow, but you won't because your environmental lobby won't let you. Your unions won't let you, and your consultants are making too much money from the current system. Shapiro pulled out photos, actual photos of homeless encampments in Venice Beach, in San Francisco, and in Oakland. This is what $24 billion bought, which are tent cities that look like third-world countries. People are dying from disease and drug overdoses in broad daylight. Is this success? Newsom's face was flushed now, claiming, You are cherry-picking the worst examples. These aren't cherry-picked. This is Venice Beach, which is one of the most expensive zip codes in America. This is the Tenderloin in San Francisco, where people step over human feces on their way to work. This is Oakland, where homeless encampments stretch for blocks. You've been governor for 6 years, and this got worse under your leadership. Bayard tried to moderate, asking Governor Newsom how he responds to the cost per unit criticism. Newsom took a breath and tried to sound reasonable. Building supportive housing requires more than just construction, as it includes services, mental health treatment, and substance abuse counseling. Then itemize it, Shapiro demanded. Show me the breakdown of the $750,000 per unit. Where does that money go, and what services cost $600,000 per person? Newsom didn't have an itemized breakdown because, if he did, it would show how much went to administrative costs. It would reveal consultant fees, union wages inflated by project labor agreements, environmental review costs, and permit fees. It would prove Shapiro's corruption argument. These are complex projects, Newsom said. Complexity is an excuse for failure. Other states build homeless housing for a fraction of the cost. Other cities have reduced homelessness. You've increased it while spending more than anyone. That is not complexity. That is incompetence. The first segment ended with Newsom unable to defend the homelessness spending. Bayard moved to a commercial break. In the green room, Newsom's team was in crisis mode. He's not letting you talk, his chief of staff said. You need to demand equal time because he's just throwing numbers. The numbers are real, Newsom said. We need to pivot and make it about compassion versus cruelty. Make it about values. But when they came back from commercial, Shapiro had more numbers ready. Next segment, California's population loss. Bayard said, Mr. Shapiro, you mentioned this earlier, so please expand on it. Shapiro pulled out a U-Haul price sheet, an actual printout from U-Haul's website. This is from last week. I checked rental rates for moving trucks from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas. It costs $2,500 for a one-way truck rental. From Austin to Los Angeles, it is $500 for the same truck in the same distance. Why is it 5 times more expensive to leave California than to move there? He let the question hang. The audience could figure it out, realizing that 5 times more people are leaving than arriving. U-Haul prices are set by supply and demand. There is massive demand for trucks leaving California, and almost no demand for trucks going there. That is the market telling you that people are fleeing your state. Newsom tried to look unconcerned, saying some people relocate for various reasons. 500,000 people net loss in 3 years is not random relocations. This is an exodus, and I can tell you exactly who's leaving. The middle class, teachers making $65,000 a year who can't afford rent, nurses who can't buy homes, firefighters who commute 2 hours because they can't afford to live in the communities they serve. The middle class is being destroyed by your policies. Shapiro pulled out more statistics. Median home price in California is $800,000, while in Texas it is $350,000 for the same size house. Your policies, zoning restrictions, environmental regulations, and permit fees make housing artificially expensive, so the middle class leaves. Your gas prices are $5.50 per gallon, while the national average is $3.40. Your gas taxes and regulations add over $2 per gallon. Working families can't afford to drive to work. Your state income tax goes up to 13.3%, while Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and Nevada have 0. You tax the middle class into poverty, then wonder why they leave. Newsom tried to interrupt, claiming we have better schools. You rank 40th in education outcomes. You spend $17,000 per student, which is the highest in the nation, and rank 40th in results. Texas spends $12,000 and ranks 28th. You spend more and get worse results. The audience gasped at that. Shapiro had the education statistics ready, highlighted in a binder. He pulled out National Assessment of Educational Progress scores. 4th grade reading in California ranks 37th. 8th grade math in California ranks 39th. Your schools are failing, and you know it. That's why you send your 4 kids to private school. Newsom's jaw tightened, stating, "My children's education is not a topic for debate. It is completely relevant. You send your kids to Sacramento Country Day School, which costs $30,000 per year per child. That is elite private education. But you oppose school choice that would let poor families send their kids to better schools. Why do you get to choose, but they don't?" "That is a personal family decision," Newsom repeated. "Exactly. It is a personal decision, and it should be a personal decision for everyone. But you keep Black and Hispanic kids trapped in failing public schools while your kids get elite education. You won't even send your kids to the public schools you claim are adequate. If you don't trust them for your children, why should poor families trust them for theirs?" This hit hard, as the hypocrisy was undeniable. Newsom sent his kids to private school while opposing school choice. The audience could see it. "I believe in strengthening public education," Newsom said. "Then send your kids there. Put them in Oakland public schools that rank in the bottom 10% nationally. Or Sacramento public schools. Prove that you believe in the system you force everyone else to use." Newsom had no response to that because he'd never send his kids to those schools. They weren't good enough, and everyone watching knew it. Shapiro pressed the advantage. "This is the pattern with you. You live differently than you govern. You tell Californians to make sacrifices you won't make, to accept schools you won't accept, to pay taxes you avoid, to follow rules you break. Let me ask the audience," Shapiro said, turning to face the crowd. "How many of you used to live in California?" About 30 hands went up, which was 15% of the audience. "Keep your hands up if you left, because it was too expensive." All 30 hands stayed up. "How many of you are better off now than you were in California?" All 30 hands remained raised. Shapiro turned back to Newsom. "There is your answer. The people who left your state are better off. They have more money, better housing, lower taxes, and a better quality of life. That's not success for California. That's failure." Newsom tried one more pivot, saying, "But we have incredible innovation. Technology companies that are leaving," Shapiro corrected. "Let's talk about that." Shapiro pulled out another list. Tesla moved headquarters from Palo Alto to Austin. Oracle moved from Silicon Valley to Austin. Hewlett-Packard, born in California, moved to Houston. Charles Schwab moved from San Francisco to Texas. CBRE Group moved from Los Angeles to Dallas. These aren't small businesses. These are Fortune 500 companies. Your tax base and your job creators are leaving. So why? Newsom tried to minimize it, saying we still have more Fortune 500 headquarters than any other state. You had more, but you're losing them, and you're losing their tax revenue and jobs. Elon Musk, who built Tesla in California, moved the company to Texas. He didn't move because of weather. He moved because of your policies. Your regulations, your taxes, and your hostile business environment caused this. Shapiro had the receipts, actual quotes from CEOs explaining why they left. Elon Musk said California has become complacent about its economic success and has taken it for granted. He is talking about you. Oracle CEO Larry Ellison said we were able to recruit better talent in Texas with lower cost of living. Translation: your state is so expensive people won't move there for jobs. HP CEO Antonio Neri said we need to be in an environment that allows us to operate efficiently. Translation: your regulations are strangling business. Newsom tried to defend, saying these are business decisions based on many factors. Yes, and all those factors point to California being a terrible place to do business. High taxes, extreme regulations, expensive energy, and labor laws make hiring difficult. The legal environment encourages frivolous lawsuits. You've created a hostile environment for business, and you wonder why they leave. Shapiro pulled out economic growth statistics. California GDP growth was 2.1% last year. The national average was 2.5%, Texas was 4.3%, and Florida was 3.8%. You're growing slower than the national average, despite having every natural advantage. And your per capita income growth which is how much the average Californian's income grows, ranks 47th. You rank 47th out of 50 states. You're one of the worst states in America for income growth. The audience was stunned. California, the success story, ranked 47th in income growth. Newsom tried to explain that they have a higher baseline income. So you're stagnant. People in California aren't getting richer, they're getting poorer relative to the cost of living. Which brings us back to the poverty rate of 23.5%. Bayer jumped in, saying, "We need to move to our next segment, crime and public safety." Governor Newsom, Proposition 47, made theft under $950 a misdemeanor. Critics say this led to a retail theft epidemic. So what is your response? Newsom looked relieved to have a different topic. Proposition 47 was passed by voters, not by me. Crime statistics show that overall crime is down. Because stores stopped reporting, Shapiro countered. Shapiro was ready for this. When district attorneys won't prosecute, why would stores waste time reporting theft? Let me show the audience what your policies created. He signaled to the control room, and a video played on the monitors. Security camera footage showed people walking into stores, filling garbage bags with merchandise, and walking out. Security guards stood by doing nothing. Multiple clips from different stores and different cities showed the same pattern. That's San Francisco. That's Los Angeles. That's your policy. Theft under $950 is effectively legal, so people steal with impunity. Organized retail theft has become a business model. More footage showed people with shopping carts full of stolen goods walking out of Target, out of Walgreens, and out of CVS. Nobody was stopping them. Walgreens closed 17 stores in San Francisco because they couldn't operate with this level of theft. CVS closed 12. Target had to lock up basic items. Deodorant was in locked cases, toothpaste, and shampoo. In one of the richest cities in America, you have to ask a clerk to unlock a case to buy deodorant. That's not a functioning society. The audience was watching the videos in stunned silence. Some were shaking their heads. This is what progressive prosecution looks like. Your district attorneys appointed by officials you support won't prosecute these crimes. San Francisco, DA Chesaboudin was so bad that liberal San Francisco recalled him. They voted him out in a special election. That's how bad it got. Newsom tried to push back, saying public safety is a priority. Then why are stores closing? Why are people fleeing San Francisco and Oakland? Why is Union Square, once the shopping destination of the West Coast, now half empty? Because stores can't operate there. Shapiro had the statistics ready. Retail square footage in San Francisco is down 32% since 2019. Stores are leaving because they can't stay in business when theft is legal. And you know who that hurts? Poor neighborhoods. Stores close in their communities, so they have to travel farther to buy basic goods. Your progressive policies hurt the people you claim to help. Bayer looked at his notes, stating, "We're entering our fifth segment." Mr. Shapiro, you mentioned the governor's personal conduct earlier, so please expand on that. Shapiro's expression hardened, as this was personal for him. November 6th, 2020. Governor, what were you doing that day? Newsom knew exactly where this was going. I don't recall the specific date. Let me refresh your memory. You were at the French Laundry restaurant in Napa Valley. It was a birthday party for Jason Kinney, a lobbyist. 12 people at the dinner, indoors, no masks, at a restaurant charging $350 per person. The total bill was over $15,000. Shapiro pulled out the receipt, the actual leaked receipt from the dinner, and showed it to the camera. That same week you told Californians they couldn't have Thanksgiving with their families. Restaurants were ordered closed, and small businesses were dying. You held daily press conferences telling people to stay home, wear masks, and avoid gatherings. And you were at a $15,000 dinner with lobbyists. Newsom had apologized for this at the time, but Shapiro wasn't done. Who was at that dinner? Jason Kinney, lobbyist for the California Medical Association, Dustin Corcoran, CEO of the California Medical Association, other healthcare lobbyists, and people who had business before the state. 2 months later, The California Medical Association received a $150 million contract from the state. Was that discussed over your $300 meal? That's implying corruption, Newsom protested. That doesn't imply anything. I'm implying that you had lobbyists at an expensive dinner during a lockdown you imposed, and those lobbyists later got massive state contracts. That's called pay-to-play. That's called hypocrisy. Shapiro pulled out more examples. Your Plumpjack wineries, your family business. During COVID, you designated wineries as essential businesses. They stayed open while other small businesses were forced to close. But your family's wineries operated. Then your Plumpjack businesses received $2.9 million in PPP loans. You're worth $20 million, so you didn't need PPP loans. You took them anyway while small businesses that actually needed help couldn't get them. Those loans went to employees, Newsom claimed. Those loans went to businesses you own. Businesses that were already designated essential and allowed to operate. Businesses owned by a multimillionaire while actual small businesses were dying. You were collecting millions in federal aid for your family's companies. The audience was restless. This wasn't abstract policy. This was personal corruption. Your kids, Shapiro continued, 4 children all attending Sacramento Country Day School. $30,000 per year each. That's $120,000 in private school tuition annually. While you tell poor families in Oakland and Los Angeles that their public schools are adequate. While you oppose school choice and fight against charter schools. I support public education, Newsom insisted. You support it for other people's children, not for your own. You won't send your kids to the schools you force everyone else to accept. That's not supporting public education, that's elitism. That's rules for thee, but not for me. Shapiro was on a roll now. Let's talk about climate. You lecture about climate change, and you've banned gas-powered cars by 2035. You push for electric vehicles, and then you tell people not to charge their electric cars during heat waves because the grid can't handle it. You mandate a technology the grid can't support. We're transitioning, Newsom said. You're failing. You have the highest electricity rates in the continental United States. You have rolling blackouts during heat waves. You shut down nuclear plants, and then wonder why you don't have enough power. And while you lecture Californians about reducing emissions, you fly on private jets. Your administration has taken dozens of private flights, each one producing more emissions than an average Californian produces in a year. But you get to fly private while telling workers they can't afford gas for their cars. Every example landed, and every piece of hypocrisy was documented. Newsom lived by different rules than he imposed on everyone else. Here's the pattern, Shapiro said, looking directly at the camera. Gavin Newsom locks down California, but goes to luxury dinners. He closes small businesses, but keeps his family's wineries open. He opposes school choice, but sends his kids to elite private schools. He lectures about climate while flying private. He taxes the middle class while living in a mansion. He tells people they can't afford housing while he owns multiple properties. He is the embodiment of progressive hypocrisy. Rules for thee, but not for me. Newsom was visibly angry now, claiming you're distorting. I'm showing receipts. The French laundry bill is real. The private school enrollment is public. The PPP loans are documented. The private jet flights are tracked. These aren't distortions. These are facts. Bayer tried to move forward, announcing the final segment before closing statements. Mr. Shapiro, you wanted to discuss California's infrastructure projects. Let's talk about the high-speed rail, Shapiro said, pulling out the thickest binder yet. California high-speed rail was approved by voters in 2008. They were told it would cost $33 billion. It was supposed to connect San Francisco to Los Angeles and be completed by 2020. Here we are in 2025. Governor, how many miles of operational high-speed rail does California have? Newsom knew this was a disaster. We're making progress on the initial segment in the Central Valley. How many operational miles? The project has faced challenges. How many operational miles of track can people ride on today? Silence filled the room. 0, Shapiro said. The answer is 0. 15 years after approval and over $20 billion spent, you have 0 operational miles. You've built some concrete structures, some overpasses, and some bridges to nowhere. But no functional high-speed rail. He pulled out photos of concrete pillars standing in empty fields. Incomplete structures and construction sites looked abandoned. The current cost projection is $128 billion, nearly 4 times the original estimate for a project that's produced nothing. For comparison, China built 25,000 miles of high-speed rail in the same time period. You can't build 500 miles in California. This is complex engineering, Newsom defended. It's not engineering. Japan built bullet trains in the 1960s. This is corruption, bureaucracy, and unions inflating costs. You're paying construction workers $150,000 a year to move dirt. The private sector could build this for 1/3 of the cost in half the time. Shapiro had the cost breakdowns. Your project labor agreements require union wages that are triple market rates. Your environmental review process takes 7 years. Your land acquisition costs are inflated because you announce routes before buying land. So property owners hold out for maximum prices. This isn't a failure of engineering. It's a failure of governance. We're committed to completing it, Newsom stated. You've been committed for 15 years with 0 results. This is a $100 billion failure that exemplifies everything wrong with California government. Overpromise, overspend, underdeliver. Bayer jumped in saying, "We're running short on time. Let's move to closing statements. Governor Newsom, you have 2 minutes." Newsom took a breath, having been battered for 90 minutes. It was time to try to recover with a strong close. "Thank you, Brett. Look, I came here tonight knowing that Ben would throw statistics and attacks. That's what he does. But governing isn't about statistics. It's about values. It's about vision. And California represents a vision of America's future. A diverse, inclusive, innovative future where we tackle climate change, where we protect rights, and where we build opportunity for everyone." He was finding his rhythm again, back to the aspirational rhetoric. Yes, we have challenges, as every state does, but we're not running away from them like Ben did. We're staying and fighting. Fighting for affordable housing, fighting for good schools, and fighting for clean energy. Fighting for an America that looks like California. Diverse, dynamic, and forward-thinking. Ben can throw all the numbers he wants, but he's ignoring California's incredible success. Our innovation economy, our world-leading universities, and our cultural influence. Our moral leadership on issues like climate and immigration and rights. We're not perfect, but we're building the future while other states cling to the past. So, yes, I'm proud of California, proud of what we've accomplished, proud of what we represent. And I'll continue fighting for a California and an America that lives up to our values. He sat back. It was a decent close, not great, but decent. Back to vision and values, away from the statistics that had destroyed him all night. Bayer turned to Shapiro. "Mr. Shapiro, your closing statement." Shapiro didn't need notes. He'd been building to this for 90 minutes. Governor Newsom just did what he's done all night. Talked about values when he can't defend outcomes. Talked about vision when the reality is disaster. Let me remind everyone what we've established tonight with facts, not rhetoric. California has the highest poverty rate in America at 23.5%. That's not a vision, that's failure. California spent $24 billion on homelessness and made it 42% worse. That's not fighting for people, that's incompetence. California lost over 500,000 residents, and the middle class is fleeing. That's not diversity and dynamism. That's exodus. California's schools rank 40th despite highest spending, and your own kids don't attend them. That's not moral leadership. That's hypocrisy. California has organized retail theft because you made it legal, and stores are closing. That's not progress. That's chaos. California spent 15 years and $20 billion on high-speed rail and built 0 operational miles. That's not innovation, that's corruption. Shapiro leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. Gavin Newsom represents everything wrong with modern progressivism. He lectures about climate while flying private jets. He lectures about equity while sending his kids to elite schools. He lectures about affordable housing while living in a mansion. He lectures about following rules while breaking them at the French Laundry. He spent billions making problems worse while blaming everyone but himself. He says, "I ran away from California. I didn't run away. I escaped. Escaped from a state that taxed me into poverty despite a six-figure income. Escaped from failing schools. Escaped from crime and homelessness and dysfunction. And I'm thriving in Florida. Better quality of life, more opportunity, lower costs, and safer streets. That's not California's success, that's California's failure. And tonight, Governor Newsom couldn't defend it because his record is indefensible. His policies are disasters, and his hypocrisy is undeniable. California doesn't have a revenue problem, as it has the highest taxes in America. California has a leadership problem, and that problem is standing right next to me. Pretending that failure is success, that exodus is desirable, that dysfunction is vision. Californians deserve better. Americans deserve better. And tonight, we've seen exactly why Gavin Newsom's presidential ambitions are a joke. Because if you can't run California without destroying it, you have no business running America. Shapiro sat back. The audience erupted in applause. Not everyone, as the Democrats in the crowd stayed silent, but enough that it was clear who won this debate. Bayer wrapped up quickly. That concludes tonight's debate. Thank you to both participants. The cameras stayed on for another minute as Newsom and Shapiro shook hands perfunctorily. Newsom's smile was forced. He knew he'd been destroyed. He knew the clips would be everywhere. He knew his 2028 campaign had just been badly damaged. Shapiro knew it too. He'd done what he came to do. Exposed Newsom's record. Made him defend the indefensible. Proved that charm doesn't work against facts. As the lights came down, Newsom walked off stage to his team waiting in the wings. Their faces told him everything. This had been a disaster, and within an hour the internet would confirm it. The video clips started going viral before Newsom even left the studio. Not partisan editing, just raw footage of the most devastating exchanges. California has the highest poverty rate in America. How is that a success story? Clip 1, 5 million views in an hour. You spent $24 billion on homelessness and made it 42% worse. Clip 2, 10 million views. You send your kids to $30,000 private schools while opposing school choice for poor families. Clip 3, 15 million views. The French Laundry exchange. The high-speed rail failure. The U-Haul rates showing exodus. Every devastating moment captured and shared across every platform. By midnight, Shapiro destroys Newsom was trending #1 on Twitter. Not from conservative accounts pushing an agenda, from everyone. Liberal journalists watching the debate had to admit it was a bloodbath. I'm progressive and I support Newsom's policies, but he got destroyed tonight. Couldn't defend the numbers. Shapiro came with receipts. Newsom came with talking points. Facts won. That wasn't a debate. That was a public execution. Even MSNBC's coverage was brutal. Governor Newsom struggled to defend California's homeless crisis. Ben Shapiro had specific statistics that Newsom couldn't counter. CNN reported Shapiro repeatedly pressed Newsom on California's poverty rate, exodus, and failed high-speed rail project. Newsom pivoted to values but couldn't defend outcomes. The New York Times wrote in a contentious debate, California governor unable to defend record. By the next morning, the full debate had been watched 40 million times on YouTube. The clips had been shared over 100 million times across all platforms. It was the most watched political debate in years. Newsom's team went into crisis mode. They scheduled media appearances to do damage control. But every interview was the same. Reporters asked Shapiro's questions. Governor, he said, you spent $24 billion on homelessness and it got worse. What's your response? Governor, can you explain the $750,000 per unit cost for homeless housing? Governor, why do your children attend private school if California's public schools are adequate? Newsom tried the same pivots he'd used in the debate. This is about values. We're building the future. Republicans want to go backward. None of it worked because Shapiro had framed everything around outcomes, results, and numbers, and Newsom had no good answers. Within a week, his national polling cratered. He'd been at 18% for the 2028 Democratic nomination before the debate, tied for second place. After the debate, he dropped to 7%, behind Kamala Harris, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, and Pete Buttigieg. Donors started getting nervous. Major California donors who'd been preparing to back him for 2028 began hedging. Can he defend his record nationally? Tonight showed he can't. His approval rating in California dropped from 54% to 42% in 2 weeks. Republicans immediately started using debate clips in campaign ads. Gavin Newsom couldn't defend California's failures. Why would we give him more power? The California recall movement, always simmering but never successful, gained momentum. They wouldn't get enough signatures to force a recall, but it showed weakness. 3 months after the debate, major companies announced they were leaving California. Each press release mentioned the same issues Shapiro had raised: high taxes, excessive regulation, cost of living, and dysfunction. We're relocating our headquarters to Austin to provide better opportunities for our employees in a more affordable environment. Translation: California is too expensive and dysfunctional. Each announcement was another validation of Shapiro's arguments. Each one another blow to Newsom's credibility. 6 months after the debate, Newsom held a press conference. He announced he was forming an exploratory committee for 2028, a required procedural step, but everyone knew what it meant. He was running. The press conference was painful to watch. Every question was a variation of Shapiro's debate attacks. Governor, how do you respond to criticism that California's poverty rate undermines your electability? Governor, what's your plan to address the exodus of middle-class families from California? Governor, business leaders cite the issues Ben Shapiro raised in your debate. How do you win back their confidence? Newsom gave the same answers he'd given in the debate: vision, values, future. But they rang hollow now. Everyone had seen that those answers didn't work when confronted with facts. A year after the debate, Newsom quietly announced he wouldn't run for president in 2028. The official statement said he wanted to focus on finishing the important work in California. Translation: the debate had destroyed his national viability. Political analysts were blunt. The Shapiro debate ended Newsom's presidential ambitions. He couldn't defend California's record, couldn't explain the failures, couldn't overcome the hypocrisy. That 90-minute debate did more damage than years of opposition research could have done. The debate became legendary in political circles, taught in communications classes at universities as a case study in preparation versus charm. What happens when a polished politician faces someone with detailed facts and won't let them deflect? Conservative media called it the night Gavin Newsom's presidential dreams died. Liberal media called it a masterclass in how not to debate. Everyone agreed Shapiro had destroyed him, not through cheap shots or personal attacks, through relentless, specific, documented facts about Newsom's record that he couldn't defend. Ben Shapiro's podcast the next day was straightforward. Last night wasn't about me destroying Gavin Newsom. It was about reality destroying Gavin Newsom. I just forced him to confront it on live television. He's a talented politician. Great hair, great smile, great at delivering talking points. But when you actually have to defend policies with facts, charm doesn't work. Numbers don't care about your rhetoric. California's numbers are a disaster. Highest poverty rate, homeless epidemic, middle-class exodus, business flight, failing schools, retail theft, energy failures, infrastructure failures. None of that is disputable. Those are facts from government sources. I didn't destroy Newsom. His record destroyed him. I just made him face it. The podcast was downloaded 15 million times. The debate had elevated Shapiro's profile dramatically. He was now one of the most influential conservative voices in America. All from 90 minutes of making a governor defend his record. 5 years later, in 2030, Newsom's term as governor ended. He didn't run for Senate or any other office. Just quietly left politics. Went back to his family's business interests. gave occasional speeches for large fees. But his political career was over. The debate had done that. 90 minutes where charm met facts and lost. Where vision met outcomes and couldn't survive. Where a smooth-talking politician discovered that you can't spin your way past systematic failure. California continued struggling with the same problems. The next governor inherited the homeless crisis, the exodus, and the dysfunction. Some things got better, some got worse. But Gavin Newsom's legacy was set. Not by his policies, not by his vision. By 90 minutes on live television, where he couldn't defend his record. Where Ben Shapiro asked simple questions. Why is California failing? And Gavin Newsom had no good answers. That was the legacy, not the presidential campaign that never happened, not the transformative leadership that never materialized, just a debate where facts destroyed rhetoric, and everyone who watched remembered it. The debate that ended a presidential campaign, the 90 minutes that proved charm doesn't beat facts. The night Gavin Newsom learned that if you can't defend your record, you don't deserve higher office. That was the California disaster debate. And it was exactly as advertised.